So I don't know, like this is the first time I've invested in a Broadway show, but it's very formulaic.
Okay.
And that's kind of one of the interesting things about it. When you think of a theater company, it's an actual company.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a balance sheet, and they know exactly how much they have to raise, like a startup business, and they know exactly what the run rate is. So you know how many seats need to be in the theater every night in order to break even and when you get your money back. So there's usually a minimum amount.
Okay.
And let's say it's around 25 grand. I think it really depends on the project.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Seen and Heard. I'm Madeline Rosene, and today I am here with producer, business owner, and artist Dan Hill. Hi, Dan.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here.
Me too. So today we're going to talk about, how you got into crisis management, how you got into mentoring artists, really, and all the creative endeavors you do, including production and producing major artistic projects.
Oh, I'm excited to talk about it.
Me too. What are some things that people would maybe recognize that you've worked on?
Well, I've had some documentaries, like on Rolling Stone. I did one with and I'm currently investing in a Broadway musical, Water for Elephants. That
Amazing.
We're proud of 7 Tony nominations.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you into Broadway? Like, how did that come about?
I've been to shows.
Sure.
It's never been my passion, but a friend of mine who I've done film projects with is one of the lead producers. And so there were some opportunities to do some stuff for humanity through this, like helping with elephant conservation, helping with messages around domestic violence, because those are themes in the movie. And so that's kind of the role I've played, is how you take the story and connect it to people's lives through charitable projects. So I invest in it, but it's really that part of it.
So you're just a terrible person.
Well, you could argue maybe I'm trying to make up for things that I've done, but yeah.
Amazing. That's really cool. So, in order to invest and be a producer in that, capacity, like, do you need like a big lump sum of money to invest in a project like that?
So I don't know, like this is the first time I've invested in a Broadway show, but it's very formulaic.
Okay.
And that's kind of one of the interesting things about it. When you think of a theater company, it's an actual company.
Oh, yeah.
And they have a balance sheet, and they know exactly how much they have to raise, like a startup business, and they know exactly what the run rate is. So you know how many seats need to be in the theater every night in order to break even and when you get your money back. So there's usually a minimum amount.
Okay.
And let's say it's around 25 grand. I think it really depends on the project.
That's cool. And so you know what your ROI is going to be if
Yes.
things go as they
Yes,
are planned.
and there's a saying, and I only recently read it when I was looking at this, that you can't make a living on Broadway, but you can make a killing.
Oh.
So it's kind of like the startup world in tech that,
Okay.
for every 10 projects, 9 will fail, but 1 will be huge.
Wow.
It's kind of the same with Broadway.
Oh, it's so interesting.
And one of the things I learned is that a lot of the money is in the touring, but you can't invest in the touring unless you invest in the Broadway. And so there are people who invest in a Broadway show knowing that they may not make their money back or will lose, but then they'll get it in the tour.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's
but like
really
the Hamilton investors, that's the one in this, billion, they're all still making money from that show.
That's fantastic.
So
Wow. Yeah, I guess it's a lot more exciting than, buying stock. I don't know.
it is.
to me.
It's fun. And, I don't know that I would do it again. There was the friendship connection
Yeah.
to
Right.
this, and then the ability to help with some causes. But, it's been fun for sure.
That's awesome. All right. So, I would love to hear about the documentaries that kind of got you into production. And before you were investing as a producer, did you do any kind of production like production that I've done? Like, I'm on set and I'm assisting and I'm helping with this and that. And did you do any other kinds of production before?
Yeah. So, and I want to clarify on the Broadway show, I'm not listed as a producer.
Okay.
I work on the production team, and to get to be listed, you got to get to a certain level of investment, and I wasn't ready to do that for my first one.
Right, of course.
But yeah, I've been either dabbling or really investing a lot of time in production for a long time. I used to have my own talk radio show.
Cool.
And this was when talk radio was a thing, and I would interview people in entertainment, writers, things like that. And and it was so fun. I would have people like the Crocodile Hunter,
Wow.
Steve Irwin.
Oh my gosh, you got to interview him?
Oh yeah.
Fantastic.
Lyle Lovett. I had some really great guests, and the truth is that it was because I wanted to meet these people.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I got syndicated with that. I did some documentaries early on foster care and adoption because some of the policy work I was doing, and then the most recent one, I've helped with some of Frank Marshall's projects, who's the one who gets me into some of these, but he and I co-produced a documentary about a musician named Jimmy Dennis, who was wrongly convicted and spent 25 years on death row.
Oh my God.
And got out 4 or 5 years ago, and kind of his journey, and we tied it to the music, because music was what got him through 25 years of solitary confinement.
Oh my gosh.
Was playing songs in his head. And
wow.
So I did that one with Rolling Stone, and I have other things in the works, but business keeps getting in the way.
Wow. That's incredible. I have to see that documentary now. I always wonder what I would do in solitary confinement, and I always think lyrics,
Yeah.
That would be my jam.
Yeah, it saved his life, he says, but he's a great guy.
Wow.
And it's a tragic story that, he was on the verge of getting his first record deal. And he was a teenager in Philly with a group that was really getting traction, and then he goes away.
Wow. Yeah. So you've always had like a soft spot for artists, I feel like. Is that true? And how did that come about?
Yeah, and I think part of it is like I'm a business person with an artist soul. Right. And I've always felt kind of trapped in the world of business, that's how I pay my bills. Yeah. And, so I've always tried to stick close to the art. But even as a little kid, my first business was a music company in elementary school. And it's not one to be proud of. It's funny. But I've always tried to either be creating art or connected to it somehow. And I think part of it's because I felt at many times in my life weird. And the people I felt most comfortable around were artists and creative types. And so I needed to find a way to be relevant in their world. Yeah. And so if I can help them or be a part of it somehow. And so I've stuck close to it my whole life.
Can we just give like a 2-minute breakdown of your first business? Because I love that story. It's hilarious. And how you got in trouble.
Yeah. So I was, before Napster, I was a record pirater in 5th grade, making dupes of albums, vinyl albums, using a cassette thing, and the FBI came to my elementary school and busted us. Now, I want to be clear, I didn't know that was breaking a law. It never crossed my mind that maybe that's why I'm trying to help emerging artists, is I have a lifetime, that's my life sentence, is trying to make up for stealing money from artists in 5th grade.
Oh, it's really adorable. Okay, cool. So, all right, let's go back to crisis management, or I guess forward. I'm not really sure what the timeline is for you. So
it's tough.
I also know that you were like a firefighter and in the military, and is that how you started your career?
Yeah, I mean, I was I'm adventurous,
yes.
And so in college, I played. I went to play soccer. Okay. And I had to do a community service project for a class, and the fire department was close. I walk in and I say, "Can I volunteer?" But it was a volunteer fire department. I was thinking answer phones, sweep floors, and they're like, "So you want to be a volunteer fireman?" And pride got the best of me, and I said yes.
Oh my gosh!
Never crossed my mind. But honestly, one of the best things I ever did, because I ended up being the mass casualty person at that fire department. I went to the schools for it, which teaches you triage,
Wow.
teaches you about prioritization when the world is blowing up around you. And even the elements of fire, like heat, fuel, oxygen,
Yeah.
that's a crisis.
Right.
And to put out a fire, you have to just eliminate one of those, oxygen, fuel, or heat. And it's the same with the crisis.
That's
and
so cool.
so it really, those fundamentals have gotten me through decades of doing this work.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So what was your kind of first crisis management project? Was it for like a corporation or like an individual's business? What was it like?
It was for a politician, actually.
Oh, nice.
This guy, actually, I'd worked with him on a crisis in his business. He ran a construction company in New Mexico, and his name is Gary Johnson, and he was 35, and we started a little company together. And then he decided at 39 to run for governor, got elected governor, later ran for president as the Libertarian candidate for president.
Wow.
It's that Gary Johnson. And I, so in his administration for 8 years, I was kind of the fixer. So when there was a prison break or something, I went to the Department of Corrections and tried to help with that. When there was forest fires, I worked on those. And so state police.
Sure.
And so I just kind of made my way around the state government doing that. And then I developed that reputation, started my own little firm. And the first crisis client I got was during Enron, which was a major corporate crisis.
Yeah.
Arthur Andersen, their accounting firm, I started doing work for them as a consultant. So it just kind of blew up. Wasn't
Sure.
a career I'd ever thought of, but
Yeah,
there
I mean, because
was.
you were doing crisis management essentially before it was a thing.
Correct.
Right. And now there's lots of people who like tout that as their expertise in PR.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. And do you think that because of social media, perhaps, there is more need for crisis management?
It's just changed.
Yeah.
Like back then, the news cycle was so much longer.
Yeah.
A crisis lasted for weeks, months, sometimes a year, whereas today it's over in a flash because people don't have attention span. So in some ways, social is exposed like corporate wrongs and ethics things that wouldn't have ever been found, but how long they last. So it's a different skill set
Right.
today.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that's my specialty at all.
Sure.
I'm way more into the deep fundamental change than the how do we fix this on social.
Right. I get it. Okay. That makes sense. Have you ever helped like artists with their?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. I think because early on I was doing some stuff in entertainment and music in particular that musicians would end up coming to me. Could be a band of brothers or the two figures in the band that are and they're at odds, or issues with the label, which has happened many times, or even like one of the female musicians I worked with had some very heavy stuff around sexual assault that had happened to her, and just helping her find her voice through that. And so it kind of runs the gamut. One thing I never do is I won't help someone accused of sexual assault deal with that. And that doesn't mean people aren't wrongly accused. That does happen, but I just made it early on, I'm only on one side of this issue.
Good for you. Yeah.
So I've never done that.
Yeah. That helps. I guess I want to know, I know you also kind of dabble in stand-up comedy. So you do so much. Like, where do you even have the time?
Well, I have this, I call it a gift, ADHD.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and that helps.
Yeah.
And I have trauma in my life, having done things in firefighting and military. I've seen a lot of stuff and been through a lot. And comedy became an outlet for getting through the night, like night terrors and stuff. How do I deal with that? And so I started trying to think of funny things before I went to bed.
Yeah.
And got very conscious about what I didn't consume around those hours. And then I started waking up with jokes.
Awesome.
And so now I've made progress. And so what do we do with that? And so the funny thing is I would start writing down. I'm like, I went through that period of thinking of funny things, but not writing them down, and then spending months trying to remember what it was.
Yeah.
So then I started just writing it down. And to me, the hilarious thing is everything I dream is just the funniest thing you've ever heard in your life. I write it down. Later the day I read it and I'm like, I cannot believe that I thought that was funny.
I do the same thing with lyrics. It's really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just like, wow, this is good.
Yeah.
This is it. But I don't perform it. I did it once, and I don't know that I'll ever do it again.
Okay.
I have a dream of doing it at the Apollo.
Got it. Yeah.
And I have a whole concept around that.
That would be
and maybe
amazing.
one day. But no, it's really a survival tool.
Sure. I love that. Yeah, I mean, definitely music is a survival tool for me, too. It's crazy because it's like you went from the physical, literal crisis to the corporate and an artistic crisis. The physical being like fire and an actual crisis. And then so when you work with artists, did that kind of get you into the mentorship side of things for artists?
Yeah. I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
What I know is that one of the things about crisis is I had said you get to see people at their vulnerable spot. And what I spent my career doing is really trying to understand the anatomy of a crisis, what causes to begin with. And I could go on forever about this because it's my life's work. But the short thing is that for the most part, you can detect a crisis up to years before it happens.
Right.
Because they're fundamentals. And so if you know that, then you can actually avoid all crises. A crisis is either a mishandling of something that you could have handled, or, but it's very rarely something, it's never actually. Like if it's they call them acts of God in insurance, but like a hurricane or something, that's not a crisis. The crisis is how poorly you handle it, or if there were things you could have done to prepare that you didn't do, like fixing the dams and then they bust.
Yeah.
So that's the crisis. That Boeing, it's not that the astronauts are stuck on the space station or that the plane fell out of the sky. It's the things that led up to it for years and years. So I thought, well, young artists are heading into these very turbulent times, and if I can equip them with some skills or kind of rules to live by and help them avoid some of this stuff, that would be really cool. Because it is, you see a lot of people fade out. Yeah.
And what kind of advice do you usually give them? And what advice would you give them, like to a new artist, to avoid crises?
A few things. One thing I'm really focused on right now is burnout. Mm-hmm. And it's very personal to me because I burned out.
Yeah.
And you know the saying, I'll sleep when I die?
Yeah.
I had this very wise doctor tell me, well, good news is that'll be soon if you keep this up.
Wow.
And he was right. And so I'm dealing with it today. And so I'll ask you, in 20 years, where do you think you'll be at musically in terms of your skill level?
Right.
You'll be a much more skillful artist, right?
I hope so, yeah.
And you'll have more experience and things. And so you'll be in 20 years, like maybe the peak, like your skill, your experience, your stories. But if at that 20-year mark you're burned out, like it's the optimal time to do stuff with that, but you can't.
Right.
And I'm struggling with that right now in the fact that I just went so hard for so long, 20-hour days, and I have more contacts, more ideas, more ability, and I can't do anything with it sometimes.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And so building time for yourself, and so I recently started thinking that fire analogy I use in crisis, and I realize as a painter, and I'm a terrible painter, but again, like comedy, it's an outlet, and I get lost in it. Mm-hmm. Creative things, go back to the fire. You have to have oxygen. Yeah. Inspiration requires the heat, it requires the fuel, but it also requires space. And if you're just cramming too much into a small space, there's not going to be enough oxygen. And I think so, making sure that you don't chase collabs and things like that, and make sure you find time to find your own voice is so important, and say no to a few opportunities, because I think you get in that survival mode of, this is it. If I'm going to make it, I got to do it right now. And there's a certain amount of that that's healthy, but you got to build breaks.
Yes. Yeah. There's a certain amount of anxiety that's healthy, but
Yes.
yeah, the anxiety that pushes us to be motivated. But like when we let it consume us and then we're just workaholics, right? That's when it gets, you start to burn out.
Yeah, there's a fine line between being in that panic mode so that you can cross the river and get to the other side. But when it gets to a point to where you're flailing and can't do anything, you're going to drown. And that drowning victim metaphor is, so they'll bring people down around them.
Yes.
And unconsciously do it, but it's just instincts kick in. Right. So how do you be the person who just gets across the? And
what do you like? Is there like physical advice you give people, like you should do this, you should do this, like to give yourself that space to find your voice? And like, what do you do?
Take breaks. Yeah. You got to take breaks. You got to find hobbies.
Yeah.
That.
It's a problem, I think, for artists particularly, because like my hobby is my art, and it's
And I think that is the hardest thing. Is like
it's my everything. It's what I want to do for all the things.
And so your hobby, but that's not in, like, you come up with fashion stuff.
I do. Yeah, of course.
So I would say you're pretty good at like.
Yeah, but that's not the case for all artists, right? Yeah.
But I think you're a bad example of that.
Yeah.
I think you're doing some good things.
Thank you.
But I do think that you get in that mode of, I got to be on tour. I got to be performing all the time. I need to try to find people to collaborate with. I need a deal, and just giving yourself a little bit of space.
Yeah.
So don't tour all the time. Don't take every gig.
Yeah.
Some of them aren't worth your time. Like the 4 hours to schlep in a U-Haul, and do someone's bar mitzvah, it might give you a little bit of money, but it's going to be 2 full days.
Yes.
And what could you have done with that time?
Right.
So it's like being choosy, even when you feel you don't have a right to be.
Right. Okay, so what about for the folks watching who want to be like you and do what you do? And they want to work in PR and do crisis management for entertainment or business. What would you say?
It's so I used to do a lot of speaking at universities, and inevitably there's more people in the communications or PR school that want to do crisis than anything.
I'm sure, yeah.
So it's the one place where I feel cool, because people are interested in that as a field. And I say, okay, who is your favorite artist? And they, whoever they say, Radiohead, I hope, but maybe they'll say someone else. And I'm like, you've got front row tickets to that show, and it's your dream, but you can't go because a crisis has happened. Are you okay with that? Like, you have to give up the things you really care about so often. It can be family, it can be personal stuff, friends. Are you willing to do that? Because you're giving your life to the service of others, and you're on call. And crises don't happen between 8 to 5, Monday to Friday.
Right.
And so, and I think it's just building skills. Like, and even today, I dabble in everything, because it's like my toolbox are all the tactics. So understanding social, understanding the anatomy of how things spread and go viral.
Yes.
Knowing reporters, all those are the pieces, so that when I'm giving someone advice, I have more tools to use. And so everyone wants to be an expert, but so they stop dabbling in the technical piece. Like, so as a musician, understanding mixing and all those things it helps you make it better for the people who are actually doing that.
That's so true.
Because you get it.
Yes, and you can communicate properly.
So never be above that. Like
Yeah.
it'll make you the best in your field.
That's really good advice. Where can people follow you to find out more, to, connect with you?
I'm more active on Instagram than other places, but I'm not very active there. It's at Hill Impact. My website, hillimpact.com, is my crisis company, and then my production is killerostridge.com.
Awesome.
And you can send me emails.
Perfect.
Interact with me. Well, I met you on Instagram.
That's true.
so-
We did. Yes.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. How many years ago was that?
I don't know.
I know. I couldn't figure that out.
It was, pandemic.
Yes. Must have been.
Time?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know exact dates. But
Yeah. And then you went to go see my mom's work at Miami Basel.
yes.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yes.
Amazing.
I think I might have sold one of her pieces.
I
'cause
really think that's amazing.
She wasn't there, and I said, "Wow, she's a world-renowned jazz musician." I was just,
Yeah.
you
Hell yeah.
and they're
Thank
like,
you.
"Oh, I love jazz."
Amazing. Hell yeah. Thank you for coming and
Of course, thanks for having
spreading
me.
your knowledge and letting me introduce you to our listeners.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.